trade in beef, poultry, and sugar. The ratification of this deal has been frozen by the European Union Parliament, and the matter has been referred to the European Court of Justice. So there are huge sensitivities in Europe also about agriculture and dairy. And I think my impression is that both the European Union and India have decided to tread lightly on this sector rather than engage in difficult negotiations on this issue. As far as the US is concerned, their sensitivities are because the farm lobby in the United States is a very powerful lobby in electoral terms. And to the extent that because of US President Trump's policies, they have lost to a large extent the Chinese market. They feel pressurized to open new markets, and that is why they are putting so much pressure on India. Now, Kartikeya, you spoke about the strategic relationship. The India and European Union are signing a security and defense partnership. And I think this is a very significant development, almost as significant as the FTA itself, because given the present disruptions in the NATO alliance, the European countries are expanding their defense budgets enormously, very, very significantly. And therefore, defense procurement becomes a very large issue in the European Union. And similarly, India also has not only a large defense procurement budget, but also it needs to diversify its sourcing away from from Russia and the United States to that extent. And if we can work out a closer relationship in terms of defense supply chains between India and the European Union, it will be for mutual benefit.
Absolutely. Shweta?
Yes, it will be for mutual benefit, and I think that's that's what we want. But it seems to be stalled for many months now. At least India-US deal. Ambassador Prabhudayal, we heard from Professor Swaran Singh, and he made some very interesting points on how it does appear that there is some sort of political willingness to make a deal work out that could be potentially beneficial to both India and the EU. But as far as India-US deal is concerned, it was supposed to come into fruition by the end of 2025. That time period lapsed. Then some said perhaps end of financial year 2026. Now that's going to happen in just 2 months from now. We are not looking at an India-US trade deal coming into fruition any time from now. In your assessment, sir, the fact that India and EU have now concluded the deal, they're going to sign the deal and ratify the deal, it will be implemented from 2027 onward. Is that going to put some sort of pressure on perhaps, administrators, top leaders and negotiators from the US to now rethink on what they're asking of India?
Indeed, this deal will put pressure on the United States. Now, it is often said that the only thing which is predictable about Donald Trump is that he's unpredictable. Now, he has taken a stance, but you never know how rapidly he will change that stance, and he may just soften his position. But, I agree entirely with Ambassador Bhatia when he pointed out that the reason why the United States is not making any sort of concessions in regard to the farm and dairy sector, that's a big impediment for the India-US trade deal. And the reason, as Mr. Bhatia pointed out, is because Trump is under pressure from the farm lobby. Now, recently, India had put, I think, 30% tariffs on lentils. And the farmers' lobby, in great panic, went to President Trump and said he must intervene with India because they are going to be very adversely affected. Now, as Ambassador Bhatia pointed out, the US is already under serious problems because of the fact that China has imposed great restrictions on the imports of soybean and corn. And it is looking for new markets, and India appears to be a country which can be a big market. And Trump is doing his utmost to pressurize India. But we also have to take care of our interests. Now, let me also mention that while the trade deal has been signed with the EU, it is yet to be ratified.
That's right.
So it is very important that the ratification process is very properly negotiated. There will be voices from within the EU who will try to oppose it, who will try to say that this trade deal doesn't take care of the interests of the farmers within the EU. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed. I'm not jumping to the conclusion that the deal has come into effect. We have to wait and see. But, and this is a fundamental but, a very good step forward is the fact that the deal has been signed. And of course, now we look forward to what happens in the ratification process. Apart from that, this summit which is taking place today is very important from the overall aspect of the strategic relationship between India and the EU. As you yourself pointed out, the summit is taking place amidst US sanctions on Russian oil, which are impacting us. We are already facing 50% tariffs, and there is likelihood that with this the new law which the US Senate is trying to examine, 500% tariffs could be imposed on us. So the challenges with the US are considerable, but as I pointed out earlier, with Trump you never know. He may
That's
suddenly
right.
shift his position, and he will do so as if to appear very, very sort of magnanimous and being a global statesman and so on and so forth. So let us watch. We are navigating through very tough times, and it's important to see what the course of events holds for us.
Commodore Dr. Ashminder Singh Bahal. But before I go to Air Commodore Ashminder Singh Bahal, let me bring everyone up to date with the issues we have. Now, for example, corporate sustainability. Corporate sustainability in Europe is about corporate sustainability due diligence, which entered into force in July 2024, comes into effect from 2027, and by 2029 will require companies to analyze the value chains and identify potential risks and impacts such as human rights violation, environmental pollution, corruption. That's one. Now, the second issue is, which we had discussed earlier, EU deforestation regulation. European Union's deforestation regulation known as EUDR, which aims at preventing products sold in EU from being sourced from deforested land. Now, it was scheduled to be implemented in December 2024. The European Parliament decided to extend the regulation timeline to December 2026. Now, according to GTRI, the EUDR is expected to impact India's agriculture export to the EU valued at $1.3 billion, more severely than exports from competing countries due to India's higher deforestation rate. That is number 3. Then carbon border adjustment mechanism. Now that's also very important. European Union starting 1st January this year has begun implementing the world first carbon tax. In its current form, CBAM would apply a carbon related charge to the import of goods from power sector, energy intensive industrial sectors, cement, steel, aluminium, oil, refinery, paper, glass, chemicals. Now, what does it mean for us? It impacts our MSMEs. It impacts our SMEs. So, it creates a problem. For example, Sangeeta Goodbole, a former revenue officer who was part of it, she has given a quote to a newspaper, says that 80% of the India's export attract less than 1% tariff. Without the trade deal, and Indian goods will not gain significant market access when the FTA is signed compared with what India would offer by lowering tariffs on the broad range of goods. So, there are a number of opinions. So, sir, Professor Swaran Singh, how do we deal with these regulatory mechanisms which are hinged around the words like corporate, human rights, carbon tax, forest, environment? These are those silent chains, if I may use the word.
Sure, that's fair. I think Ambassador Prabhudyal was mentioning that there is a lot more still to be done. Here is a deal in principle indicating that they want to come together and build not just lowering of tariffs, but integrate their value chain, production chains over a period of time. That is how it is also being called strategically driven kind of an understanding or a deal between the two sides. So one after another, there will be follow-up challenges both for European Union in terms of its ratification, in terms of working with India in building collaborations, talking about human rights, talking about pollution, deforestation areas. Likewise, for India also to come up with how to, raise those standards to become more acceptable to European countries and European market. That process is going to take maybe several years over a period of time. But once the intent is made clear that they really want to work together and integrate their, production lines and integrate their economies and build partnerships in security sector, defense production sector, in manufacturing sector, services, that intent is what is very clear, and that is why it is also being called mother of deals, because not just simply because it involves 2 billion consumers, but also that it had taken 18 years, and 2013 onwards virtually nothing was happening.